Honorable Leader of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Senators. Of course, we've had a lengthy break, and during that time we were allowed to, we certainly had time to discuss and mentioned a few things that probably I would find no need to speak to it again. But except for this very important piece of legislation, Madam President, I just need to ask or to seek clarification on a few things. One of the statements made in the previous with regards to the budget for COVID-19, the Leader of Government Business indicated that the cost was $41 million. Big one.
Leader of Government Business.
Just on a point of elucidation, Madam President, I said that was Ministry of Health's budget. That does not include anything else or any other ministry.
Okay. Thank you very much. The Ministry of Health budget for COVID. So therefore, I take it that any relief support would not have been included in this budget. And of course, thanks for the clarification. Madam President, the issue of the NIC, Madam President, and I listened to the debate in the lower house with regards to the statement, you guarded jealously. And just as a lay person, an individual who, when I entered the service in 1991, Madam President, I entered the service at a period where the position was no longer pensionable, and then monies were being deducted as a civil servant, so our contributions went directly to the National Insurance Corporation. And Madam President, when you're working in the environment and persons are receiving pension for government, and you know at some point in time you would retire, then you look to the agency and you always remember that's where your benefits will come from when you've retired. You tend to think of it in a way different to persons who expect retirement elsewhere. And therefore, Madam President, I have paid attention. I've had discussions with the Financial Control over the years, try to monitor the issue of when it's time for me to retire, what is the nature of the relationship. Madam President, during the time I have worked over the years, my time, Madam President, there's some changes that has taken place in St. Lucia that has caused government to look towards the National Insurance Scheme for support one way or the other. I know the creation of NIPRO that has invested in a number of what I consider social goods through a similar situation of what obtained with NIPDEC in Trinidad, facilitated St. Lucia in terms of having a number of what I call a number of social goods like our prisons and rehabilitations of police stations through some sort of arrangement. And I'm sure, Madam President, while these things happened, if you are a contributor to NIC, you are asking the question to yourself from time to time, is my retirement intact? And a lot of St. Lucians who would be concerned that is the only form of recourse when they would have come to an end, the days in work, will always be asking the question, NIC, are you okay? You know, and the closer you get to retirement, the more anxious you are about this. In fact, Madam President, to be honest, I get to the point right now, I'm prepared to, if they're willing, to reduce on the total and accept something and take off, because I notice what's happening in this world. And therefore, Madam President, even the actions of government at this time, on behalf of persons who are contributing to the NIC, it's only fair that certain questions be asked. When these things are done to support workers, what would happen to those of us who eventually have to retire? What is the state of the objective of the NIC? Because the NIC was established to provide support to citizens when they get to a certain time. We have changed the age because we have an aging population. And of course, we understood that there are issues with regards to how persons contribute. But here we are with this pandemic, unprecedented, nobody expected it. And we have a large percentage of persons who are unemployed. And we are responding in making this contribution to workers. Madam President, the point has been made, and I think it needs to be echoed again. The opposition supports clearly that government or NIC is going to provide relief, economic relief to persons. The quantum is something that I would like to, how did we arrive at the amount? The nature of I think that is in the regulations, but in this, the Parent Act itself, the concerns about is there a sunset clause? Will it come to an end? How do we differentiate within that clause a crisis that is not a pandemic but requires similar action, you know, or you may have more persons unemployed? Is there is the NIC thinking of a situation where it could be worse off, but the NIC is not the appropriate mechanism to respond? What can, if this thing goes on and on and on, if we have a second wave, would the NIC be in a position to continue to respond? How long will these persons remain out of a job? And can the NIC sustain making this amount of funds, you know, available to those workers, economic relief? The amount is said to be approximately, I think, 80 million. Approximately, that's what I've heard they've mentioned. What this amount represents, is it a 1 month? Is it 3 months? And since I've heard also that the annual contribution of the NIC is approximately 90, or they're about the same amount, would that cause the NIC to lose 1 year of support in future? How will the NIC recover from a grant contribution? Would it be best that the government provide support of the amount? I heard government is giving 20 million to persons who are not contributors to NIC. And when you think of the amount of 20 million, it is way inadequate. Is it a real amount? What kind of support? How will the government provide that support? So, Madam President, there are a lot of questions being asked. And that is why, Madam President, I notice every time I try to connect my contribution to other important parameters. Madam President, we're certainly in a situation where the government need to find ways and means to support the working population at this point in time. And I do not believe NIC alone can do it. And that is why, Madam President, I do recommend that we consider some of our current infrastructure agendas and decide how much of a priority these things are, and to divert resources towards providing support to St. Lucians who are unemployed. One classic example I'm asking, can we suspend at this point in time, Madam President, the large amount that is being invested on St. Jude at this point in time and proceed with completing the East Wings and commissioning it, as against spending $100 million? Madam President, I cannot help but to recall that we have removed sums from the NIC for other projects. One project in question was the Cabot project. We've invested $30 million to develop the golf course. How do we juxtapose this? And you shake your head. You know, I know, Madam President, your answer to any debate on contribution by the opposition is say nothing. Thank you very much, comrade. How do we juxtapose this amount that has been taken out of the NIC, 30 million, when we already recognize, Madam President, that we have our population that has inverted, where we have an aging population? Madam President, it means in the near future we will have less persons working to support a lot more senior persons. In fact, we will have less persons contributing to the NIC in a few years' time because of how our population has changed. So when you take all of these things into consideration, Madam President, and if, Madam President, you and I are only depending on the NIC for retirement, Madam President, we would be concerned about the health of the NIC in a few years' time. You understand, Madam President? And I think it's only good that a lot more information, and this is where, Madam President, I question sometimes, and I understand the sort of diplomacy that we use here in discussing the issues. But, Madam President, I have nothing in writing, nothing printed, showing me anything about the decisions that are being made. Is that proper? Is that the right way for it to be done? Is that the modus operandi? How could I make any informed contribution by not seeing numbers? Is it just to pass it and let it go on? Madam President, I think economic relief is very, very important. Madam President, I believe economic relief is even more important than the burial assistance you get from NIC. Madam President, I believe that as soon as we were in crisis and we needed food, I believe the NIC could at least given us $5 million to feed the people who needed the food at the time, because we're in crisis. But I'm asking the question, how far, how much should the NIC allow to do in this environment? Is there anywhere else we could look for some funds? Madam President, I saw in the estimates of expenditure, there's a sinking fund and an estimated amount of $12 million for this year on the Ministry of Finance in the sinking fund. I think, is it 12 million? I'm asking. I also understood that there was a lockbox, you know, and I asked a member whether the lockbox had turned into a grip that no longer locks. What has happened? Is there money in the lockbox? Somebody said it's only $2 million. The CIP, estimated revenue for the CIP was $45 million for this year in the estimates of expenditure. Are there other sources of funds available so that we could cushion the impact on the future of the NIC? It is a very serious matter at this point in time, recognizing our demographics, what is happening to our population, how many persons will be working in future contributing. And Madam President, the other very important point, as I understand it today, the main contributors to the NIC at this point in time are persons working in the tourism sector. Whereas they have a right to receive support because they have contributed, the foundation of the NIC is farming. Persons who work. And when tourism at this point in time is suffering, and the future for tourism looks kind of bleak, you ask, where will the resources come from in future to support the NIC? Madam President, I think any government at this point in time looking towards supporting persons through the NIC is noble, is good. But we need to do that with every bit of care. We must encourage persons who are employed through the other non-structured employment, like the construction workers, to contribute. They do so, they must do so on the law requires, but some of them have no way of doing it except make the contribution themselves. How will they feel comfortable if we do not provide information for those persons to willingly contribute their funds into the NIC? Madam President, it's important that we manage at this point in time, in this crisis, a responsible approach in using the NIC to provide the economic relief, but at the same time provide information and make it clear and transparent that we do not affect persons who want to continue to view the NIC as a place that will rescue us in our twilight years. Madam President, it's also important, very important, that we consider the NIC in terms of link it to some of what we have discussed previously. Like I said, the NIC, they have supported us in time past. The NIC is the main contributor toward the National Community Foundation. It is the parent of the National Community Foundation that has provided support to St. Lucians over the years. Madam President, while I was at the NCF for about 15 years, I know the NIC has taken steps to reduce its contribution to the NCF. Although the NCF is the only, is the main agency providing to poor and vulnerable people in the areas of health and education. And Madam President, I dare say, for the years the NCF has existed, the persons who have received support from the NCF, they are only for life-threatening situations. Life-threatening situation. In layman terms, if you're going to prevent you from dying, the NCF has been providing that support. Yet, the NIC over the years has seen reason to reduce its contribution to the NCF, National Community Foundation. At one time, they asked the NCF to even pay rent. They remove us from waterfront, and the NCF is now on High Street. So I'm saying that without having details from the NIC, I have reasons to believe that the NIC have taken a sort of a cautious attitude towards its resources in time past. And what has happened in the economy thus far to give the NIC this sort of brazen confidence when we have evidence that our population has inversed for the future. We have all of the writings on the wall that tells us that the future is not we cannot be very optimistic about certain things, and the adjustments need to be made. With all of this, Madam President, while we support, we are asking the government to provide information, evidence, documentation, so that St. Lucians, when we speak on behalf of St. Lucians, they will continue to maintain their confidence in the NCF and the NIC, especially those persons who voluntarily make their contribution and contribute significantly to the health of that entity. Because I speak here, Madam President, as a contributor. And I'm telling you, Madam President, I support the contribution, but I'm also concerned that when it's time for retirement, I do not want for them to extend it 5 years later. I know they will not be meeting me at that time. So I'm asking, Madam President, that we consider this, because personally, all of us who have to look to the NIC for our retirements will want to ensure that it maintains some sort of financial help to respond in our time of trouble. Thank you very much.